Not sure how to start this video except, well, welcome back. Welcome aboard, Dean Kirk, Mr. DJ Dean Kirk, back on the 80s and 90s YouTube channel. And I hope you like 1987 because that is going to be the countdown on the fancy playlist. August 29th, 1987. There are 45 songs on this fancy playlist. Now, keep in mind that back then I followed basically these fancy playlists back in the 80s and into the 90s and even to, well, not the 2000s, but 80s and maybe the early to mid 90s, heavily based on Billboard's Hot 100, although there are some songs on here that did not make top 40 on Billboard's Hot 100. There's a shade of electric on this fancy playlist, and got about there are about 10 or 11 top 45 extras on here. It's a 45 song playlist, in case I didn't point that out. And there are about 10 or 11 ads on this fancy playlist, including Aerosmith's comeback, one of their comeback hits. Dude looks like a lady, boy. Vivid memories back in the fall of 87. Of course, they had that song out back in the summer of 86, one of the early rap hits when they teamed up with Run DMC and they did Walk This Way. That was back in the summer of 1986, but we're in 1987 right now. Poison, added song by Poison, Kenny G, Cars, David Bowie. Poison, boy, I tell you what, that's some hair metal right there. I Want Action. They had Talk Dirty to Me, I Want Action, and then they came out with that mid-tempo, I Won't Forget You, but I probably won't be talking about those songs. They're not on the top 45, although they will be for sure. But the song debuting at number 45, Fleetwood Mac with Little Lies off of Tango and the Night. Third single off of Tango in the Night. This record, this song by Fleetwood Mac, Little Lies, I guess I was a little bit disappointed in it in a way because it's heavily glazed with high-tech 80s production. It is in high-tech 80s production mode, but it's still got that scintillating keyboards as played by Christine McVie. Her easygoing vocals graces the record. And that's the thing about Christine McVie. She could convey a lot of emotions, a freight of emotions, but she does it in sort of a restrained style. She doesn't go overboard. It's easy. I guess it kind of makes it easy to listen to or easy to take for some people. And I'm talking too much again. But it's like when she did Say You Love Me off of Rumors back in 1977. She sang that song with almost near abandon, with glee. And yet it was somewhat restrained, as this record right here, a little bit of bitterness and remorse, kind of, again, somewhat constrained. And she was married. She wrote this song, by the way, with her husband at the time. His name was Eddie Quintella. And although this record, some people think that this record may reference McVie's breakup with John McVie, her husband John McVie. She joined Fleetwood Mac with John McVie in 1970. I'll get into a little bit of that in just a minute. And she apparently, I read too, I don't know any details about this, she had an affair, apparently had an affair with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys as well. Well, the third single off the album, let's go back to 1982 with Mirage. The band members decided to take a break after making the album, and I guess going on tour after that. Boy, I tell you what, Gypsy by Stevie Nicks, one of her finest moments off of Mirage back in the late summer, fall of 82. You know something? Back in the day, back in the 70s and early 80s, Stevie Nicks sort of reminded me of Mary Pickford, the silent screen actress. A lovely woman like Mary Pickford, that big silent screen actress that everybody's forgotten about because she had that long hair, that long tresses and everything. Just sort of reminded me of Mary Pickford. It's just sort of nostalgic in that sense. But getting off topic again, talking too much. They pursued solo careers. They pursued solo careers. You know all about Stevie Nicks' solo career. She had that first really big hit solo with Tom Petty, Stop Dragging My Heart Around, I believe was the name of it back in 1981. Lindsey Buckingham had a couple of hits. There was Trouble back in the fall of 1981, and then Electric Sounding well, both of them were kind of electric sounding or electric edge to it. Trouble and Go Insane. Go Insane, a corking record back in 1984. An interesting video that went with that too. Anybody remember that? And Christine McVie, you might remember 1984, the spring of 84, when she had that song out. What was that song she had that went, Got a Hold on Me, went to number 10 on Billboard's Hot 100. And Love Will Show Us How, if I remember correctly, Love Will Show Us How, a little bit more harder edge, less commercial, maybe a little less commercial than Got a Hold on Me. And speaking of commercial, one of the strengths, I think, of Little Lies, it was more commercial than their first single, Big Love, I thought. Big Love, to me, when I first heard that song back in the spring of 87, I thought that sounds like more of an album cut than a single. Now, the interesting thing about Big Love was Lindsey Buckingham was working on his solo album. He was working on a solo album when Christine McVie, she was doing a song for a movie called A Fine Mess. She was going to cover a song she was covering a song by Elvis, Can't Help Falling in Love. She wanted to bring Lindsey Buckingham in to produce the record. And Big Love was that was going to be a single off of Lindsey Buckingham's solo album, but it came off the Fleetwood Mac album. I thought that was pretty fascinating right there. But so he goes in, he produces the record by Christine McVie, Can't Help Falling in Love. Well, guess what? A couple other members of Fleetwood Mac, they come right in. You got John McVie and then Mick Fleetwood. They come in, they provide backing vocals, and the chemistry apparently went well. I mean, relatively speaking, for Fleetwood Mac, considering the volcanic nature of some of the relationships, particularly between Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. But they thought, let's get back together. Let's make an album, and they did. They went back and recorded Tango in the Night. But from what I've read, it was a troubled environment. And as a matter of fact, the environment was so troubled when they made the album that after it was done, Lindsey Buckingham he left. He just quit the band and they replaced him. Now, I haven't followed Fleetwood Mac that much over the past 20 years, but I understand they got back together. But in the late 80s, they replaced, they had a heck of a replacement for Lindsey Buckingham. They replaced him with Billy Burnett. Billy Burnett. He was the son of Dorsey Burnett. Dorsey Burnett, who wrote that song by Ricky Nelson back in 1958 called It's Late. Dorsey Burnett, who did Tall Oak Tree back in 1960. And Billy Burnett's uncle, Johnny Burnett, You're 16 in 1960, and then there was Dreaming also back in 1960s, and they were rock and rollers too back in the late 50s, the Dorsey brothers. But anyway, Billy Burnett, he came from a rock and roll family, so he was a really good pick for the band, Fleetwood Mac, and he was with them for a while. But let's see, is there anything else? I think I got everything done. Oh, wait, I forgot one other thing. Let's talk about Christine McVie. I did just a little bit of background on her. Christine McVie, before she got married, she was Christine Perfect. She joined a band in 1967. It was in the late 60s. She was in a blues band called Chicken Shack. And they covered a song by Etta James called I'd Rather Go Blind, which went to number 14 in England. And this would be 1969. And Christine McVie, she was known as a blues singer, a good blues singer, could play a nice bluesy keyboard. And she was with them for a couple of albums before she joined Fleetwood Mac in 1970. And then the really commercial aspects of Fleetwood Mac went into warp drive when Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, they joined the band in 1970, I believe it was 1974. Because Buckingham and Nicks, they had an album out in 1973. But dead gone, I'm done. Can you believe it? And well, that's it. I'm looking over my notes because I don't want to miss something. But I believe I covered everything. Oh, by the way, going back to Christine McVie, she won Melody Maker's Award. Won 2 years in a row. She won Melody Maker's Award for Best Female Vocalist or Award for Female Vocalist 2 years in a row, 1969, 1970. All right, without further ado, coming in at number 45, well, welcome back to the big 80s, baby. Fantasy playlist of July 29th, 1987, Fleetwood Mac with Little Lies, debuting at number 45.